All right, friends, and welcome back to the Be Fabo podcast. Always an honor to share this space with you. So today's episode's going to be a little different. It's a little more personal, but also I think more universal than we realize. Because today I want to talk to you what happens when you're forced to let go of what you built. For over 40 years, most of you know that I was a photographer, a wedding and sports photographer, life photographer, just somebody who captured moments for others to be able to revisit and live and remember who they were with, who loved them, how they loved, and just where they were. It wasn't just a job to me, it was my career, but it was also who I was. I was a photographer and still am to most point to the core. It is just something I believe so much in the power of photography and what it does for us now and for us as we get older and what it does for the future generations because we exist in photos for the next generation to see who we were, what we look like, maybe where they got some traits, what the world looked like around us. All those things are powerful, and that is the power of photography. I absolutely love telling stories through my lens. I love being part of people's most meaningful moments. And yes, even some of their sad moments that were still meaningful. I photographed births. I photographed everything in between, happy moments, joyful moments, impactful moments, milestones. And I also had the very privilege of photographing someone's last breath, or that last family photo, or that baby passing shortly after birth. These things impacted me, shaped who I was and how I felt about photographing in the way that I photographed. I love capturing something they could come back and feel again. But in 2024, I photographed my last wedding and ultimately one of my last sporting events as well. Not because I wanted to, because I knew I couldn't continue. And I know some of you have heard this story before when you've heard me speaking, but I really wanted to put it here in a podcast. I've talked about some things in my health and where I am in this season throughout the last few episodes, but I really wanted to find one right now as we enter summertime and in this season of my life, I needed to be able to share it while I still had my voice working enough to be able to share it. I thought it was just years catching up with me. All the gear I carried on my shoulders, my back, all the weddings, the sports, the wear and tear that my body took. I'd already been through several back surgeries, one literally going from a professional hockey game to the hospital. And the doctors even said then it's from leaning over the walls and the panels and just leaning over with my big gear just put a strain. And I have an indentation on my right arm, my shoulder area, where I carried all this gear. Eventually, I moved to carrying everything around my waist, but it had taken a toll. This equipment is not for the faint of heart, and it's not light. It's expensive, and it's definitely not light. So my shoulder began hurting in a different way back in 2021, right after the pandemic. I really thought a lot of it was okay. I wasn't doing a lot of weddings during the pandemic because, like many other in the hospitality and event industry and just in industries and business alone, we were shut down. And while I had 27 weddings during the first part of COVID, and then in 2020, and then like 17 the following, they were all in different states. So every state mandated if I was able to photograph that wedding, if we were able to have that wedding. So I really, when my shoulder started getting even stiffer and I couldn't move it and it was just on fire, pins and needles, I just thought, wow, man, this is what happens when you don't use your shoulder all the time, right? When you got out of the habit of carrying this gear. And I just did what I've always done. I pushed through it. I figured it out. And I just kept going. And honestly, that explanation made sense to me and still makes sense to me today. I mean, I have been carrying cameras for decades. I have been leaning over. I have been in the most odd positions trying to capture that moment, wanting to be different, laying on my ground, shooting up, being high above a hockey rink or a baseball field, laying on my stomach and leaning down, all and the extra pressure of do not drop any of this gear on all the fans below. Being in those quiet positions for a wedding, knowing how to stand behind something so you're not part of the story. So the wear and tear was real. And my body had just been through a lot. So I didn't question it. I just kept adjusting. And as I said, I kept going. I changed gear. I moved from Canon to Fuji, anything that was lighter. Moved from the big double harnesses on my shoulders to things that went around my waist to eventually just putting a big strap around my arm and having the camera as an extension. And for years, the last few years, I would hear people say, I just held on to the camera with a couple fingers because it was such an extension of me. But that's when I really noticed that my right side was shaking, and it was everything I could do to hold the camera. I had always shot one-handed. I looked through the camera with one eye. I had one eye on the action, even in weddings, one eye with what's coming up, one eye focused here, and I always shot one-handed. It's how I started, and it just grew, and that's the kind of photographer that I was. Ready, agile. I didn't let the equipment tell the story. I was telling the story. I was using the tools of the camera to tell the story, but I was viewing it through how I saw it, through my little lens. And when the shaking became unbearable and I had to start using my left hand to support it, I had to start getting different tripods and monopods to hold the camera. And I was nowhere near as fast. I could not pull my camera up. My shoulder wouldn't allow it. My elbow was rigid. I could no longer hold on. And when my hands would not steady anymore, the way that it always had, and my body just wouldn't move the way that I expected it to, the way that I honestly thought it just adapted and trained to do, I remember thinking something is different. Something is off. Something is not right. So after several more injections in my shoulders and in my hands and multiple tests, after about a year of battling with insurances, as most of you know, trying to get testing done, the diagnosis finally came: Parkinson's. I didn't tell anyone for quite a while. I had to let it sink in. My wife went with me on some of the final testing, and we just kept it quiet. We just need to sit with it. And once we had a movement disorder specialist also confirm that this was onset Parkinson's, and even though I was just in my 60s, in the beginning of my 60s, it was still considered young onset Parkinson's because I was right at that fringe. So we just sat with it for weeks. And because I felt, why tell the story? But I'm going to have to say something. I'm going to have to make some hard decisions. So I knew at that moment that 2024 would be the last year I could book weddings. I've always been blessed to book 18 to 24 months out. So I knew that I could no longer be booking any weddings. So told my current clients first, and then we called the family, and then slowly started telling my close-knit friends in my inner circle. Never really announced anything to the industry, even didn't share much when I was first speaking, because I just wasn't sure. I still was in some sort of a doubt, I think. I knew that this was better news than being told you had cancer, and this was better news than some other devastating diseases that many of you may have dealt with or are dealing with or have been part of. I knew what cancer looked like. My father passed away of cancer right out of high school for me, and my wife currently has cancer. So I knew that this was going to be different for me, and how was I going to handle it? Because I think somewhere in there, I knew deep down inside, I just knew it. I knew this was something that I wasn't just going to be able to push through professionally. I wasn't going to be able to mask this professionally and hide this and keep doing the work that I was doing, continue on with my career, continue on with everything that I built over the past 4 decades, not in a way that I always had. And then here's the part that I didn't expect. Just as I was coming to terms and settling in that my photography career was going to have to cease in the way that it is, being paid for sports, being paid for weddings and families and doing events. I knew I could probably still maybe get my camera out sometimes and photograph some moments or some scenery or just life, but it wouldn't be where I was accepting payment from someone. I couldn't be in the situation of working in the moment of something actually happening. But I was also stepping into something new over the past couple of years. As some of you know, I began speaking and emceeing and then coaching. I had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, why don't you coach about life and business? You're always talking about finding that harmony and you're doing it. So why not share that? I had some people ask me about photography and sports photography, but I never really felt that teaching photography was my calling because nobody taught me. I wasn't professionally trained. I just knew it. I knew this is what I wanted to do. I had that calling. But then I started having that calling about speaking and sharing. And I love empowering an audience. And I love facilitating, roll up your sleeves and let's get things done. And I love emceeing events where I can highlight and shout out all my fellow speakers and fellow educators in this industry, wedding industry, and outside this industry, because I've been very blessed to speak at conferences for realtors and insurance agents and just hospitality people that want to know what it's like and how do you build a team and how do you empower those around you? How do you lead a little bit differently? I was also getting called to speak a lot to the neurodivergence. I stutter. You hear stuttering throughout these podcasts. And my dyslexia is something that even all these years later, while I have a system, it's a system. And I can't explain it. Anybody with neurodivergency like this is also probably can't explain it. But I just taught myself how to push through and get through it. So I've been building up my speaking and being on the road to where I was doing more speaking than I actually was doing photography. And I thought, okay, this is how I'm going to transition out. This is the next chapter. This is the next era. I'm going to use my voice to help tell stories, to help share my story, and to help others tell their story in the craft and the talents that they've been given. And I'll use my voice instead of my camera. And I remember thinking, okay, so I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to lose all of my career. I'm not going to lose being able to serve. I'm not going to lose being able to help others and empower others. Maybe I'm just going to have to learn to do it differently and rebuild in a different way and just refresh and reset what Bobbi Brinkman photography looks like, but now under the umbrella of Bobbi Brinkman Consulting. I always had Bobbi Brinkman LLC. That's housed everything with all my other little businesses. But I'll embrace this consulting. I love it. I enjoy it. I'll be on the road sharing. I'll still be meeting people. I'll be hearing other people's stories, and I'll be able to highlight their stories, their different podcasts. Maybe I'll start a new podcast that talks about that, right? Because speaking and consulting and emceeing and just hearing other people's stories and somehow sharing them matters to me just as much as it did when I was telling them through my camera. But my friends, Parkinson's disease doesn't just affect one thing. There are days that my body simply can't keep up. Waking up in the morning, if I even got sleep the night before, and trying to get out of bed or my recliner is just not going to happen. So learning to accept that and listening to that, pushing just enough where I didn't do harm is a learning curve for me. And then there's days my voice literally wouldn't show up. Full disclosure, I've tried to record this podcast for 2 days. Yesterday, my voice started coming back. The day that I sat down and jotted down some notes because of my dyslexia and also now because of my Parkinson's, my handwriting is very small and it's unlegible. So I've always used voice to text. I've had that for years, especially now with the phones. I was able to do that years ago. So as I started just talking the notes for this, I wanted to sit down and record it. On Wednesday, nothing. On Thursday, even less. So yesterday it started coming back and it wasn't there. It would go for a while, then fall away. So my message is here. My message was there, but my voice wasn't able to deliver it. Things that I did not even think I was going to have to deal with. Not being able to photograph, wondering how I'm going to support myself and my family, how I'm going to still make an income, still make an impact. And friends, it scared the living you know what out of me, right? And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just one part of my life or my career changing. It was everything. So this wasn't just one shift. It was layers of letting go and layers of learning how I'm going to rebuild and reset and a whole new way of taking care of myself so I could take care of others so they could help take care of me. A totally new way of thinking and seeing my life. And here's what I learned. Sometimes you don't walk away from what you built because you're ready. You walk away because life asks you to. And that's a different kind of decision because it's not about strategy. It's not about, I built my business for 4 decades so that I could step out. I was able to take all July off. My clients knew it for years. I took all of July off, traveled, did whatever I wanted to do, and I consistently took off every Wednesday. I had a system. I built my business that supported my life, so I was allowed to live my life. And that's what I love teaching others to do. That you can have profit, purpose, and joy. You can have all of these things by having a business and a life. You just have to build the business around the life that you want and that you deserve and make impact with both. So it's having to step away because you can no longer do what you love. You can no longer feel, and this is a deep one for me, feel that what was I going to do? Feel that the talents that I had and the way that I was doing things, how was I going to replace that? And then realizing and learning through Parkinson's some of the things that I needed to get ready for, like the possibility of losing my voice altogether. And while I'm getting the tremors and the rigidity under control with a lot of pills all day long, there were still days that all that medicine and all my workouts and all my physical therapy and my occupational therapy still was going to say, not today. So that's a different kind of decision. That's not the strategy of exiting. When I was ready to retire, I wanted to retire when I was ready to, when I was on top. And when I was, hey, I'm going to go out for anybody. I'm going to go out while I still can, while everybody still wants me around. And leaving at 62 years old, people still wanted me around. I was still being hired, even though I was sometimes older than the moms of the brides now, and sometimes even older than some grandparents. I had photographed the daughters. Then I had photographed the parents. Then I photographed their daughters. And I was just coming back around to going, hey, you photographed me. This is my granddaughter. So that was my identity. A storyteller, a photographer that told stories, whether it be a wedding, whether it be a life moment, or capturing that first athlete's goal, or that first home run, or the agony of defeat, as it used to say. I'll age myself. So what happens when it's just not the work and your career and your business that changes, but it's everything around it? You lose the rhythm. You lose your routine. You lose the way that used to define your days. As I said, I'm not good with change. So I would have Monday as an admin day. Tuesday and Thursday were photographing days. Friday was always prepping for a weekend event. This was a system I had in place for 20 years. How am I going to define my days now? Because I did not want to define them with always being in pain or with filling up with, today I can't even have a conversation with my friend because I have no voice. How was I going to continue to find my impact? How was I going to continue to make an impact? And yeah, scary, as I said, how was I going to be able to support myself? Because I'm not 65 yet. Close, but I don't have Medicare. I still have health care, and the testing and the medicine, as many of you know, anybody doing or caregiving with anybody knows the financial side of healthcare. And now I was also being called to help take care of my wife and through her cancer diagnosis and all the things that she had to do. I moved back to Missouri so I could help my sister with my mom, where I had been absent for many, many years, and she was carrying the brunt of everything. So I made the move back to St. Louis, my hometown. How am I going to fit back in? How am I going to fit into the family? I'm not the person that left. How am I going to support myself so that I can help them? How am I going to be able to support them? How am I going to be able to be a caregiver for them while also taking care of me, not really knowing how to define my days around anything but caregiving and pain and health? And for a lot of people, you start asking, who am I? Who am I now? Who I am when I'm not doing the thing that I was doing? Whether it be a 9-to-5 job, going to work, multiple businesses, a chef, whatever it is, how are you going to say who you are? How do you define who you are? How do you dig deep and ask, who am I now? And this is the part that I really want you to hear clearly, because it's taken me some time to understand it. You don't lose your purpose. You lose the way you express it. You don't lose your purpose. You lose the way you express it. And that's a big difference. Because purpose was never the job, never the career. It was the way you show up inside every job that you did daily, any client that you booked, any job you bid on. It's how you showed up inside doing that thing that you love, inside that career, inside that whatever it was that you do. When you put a camera in your hand, you're a photographer. So you showed up as a photographer. If you're a hairdresser, you show up ready to style. Whatever it is, it's the way that you show up inside the job. So right now, I'm in a different season. It's much slower. It's definitely more present. It's caregiving. It's navigating Parkinson's. And it looks nothing like what I built before. But it still matters. And maybe for you, it's not Parkinson's. It's something else. And something has changed in you. Something has changed in your business or your career or your life. A role, a season, a location, a decision. Not wanting to do what you do anymore because you've outgrown it. You have different dreams. You have different plans. You see a different path for yourself. Something you thought would last longer, but it didn't. So I want to leave you with a few things to sit with. What have you been forced to let go of? And I want you to think about these. You don't have to answer them. This isn't homework. I just want you to ponder these. Use them as a journal prompt or driving or walking, however you can do. Think about these things. If this is resonating with you, if you are in a place in your career where it isn't aligning with you, or you've been forced to make a change and you literally have to leave this, let this go and start over and refresh and restart. And I do want to say right now, it is okay to restart and refresh. You can do it all the time. Most of us are not meant to do the exact same thing every day the same way because we grow. Because when we do things and life happens, we have lessons. We learn from those lessons, sometimes good or bad. Sometimes we have to let something go. Those are decisions when you let it go. But when right now, if something is saying to you, you're going to have to step away. What have you been forced to let go of? What part of you feels like it went with it? That you also let go of something inside you? And what might still be true underneath all of that? Are you still able to say, this is who I am? This is who I was, this is who I am now, and this is who I'm becoming? If you've heard me speak, you know I'm always talking about let's really work on what matters most. And you have to decide what matters most is. That's your definition. Just like you have to define what success means to you, not what somebody else tells you or somebody else's blueprint, how somebody else's life look. What's your life look like? What's your business look like that aligns with who you are? And along the way, as you get older, you change because you outgrow something. Your plans change. You have grown into somebody that wasn't on the blueprint or framework that you had for yourself or the goals. But who are you underneath all of that when it changes? So you can rebuild and refresh and restart as many times as you want. But you don't have to rebuild everything today. You don't have to rush into what's next. But you can begin by reconnecting. Because even when life changes the plan, you're still allowed to build. You're still allowed to grow. Maybe not in the same way, but it still counts. This isn't where my story ends, friends, but it is where it changes. So again, thank you for sharing space with me. Thank you for being part of the Motivated to Be Fabulous community. Thank you for allowing me to empower and inspire you. I get so much more from you. Trust me. I leave every event I speak at a better person because of sharing that space with you. And thank you for being willing to sit here with me in these real conversations where I'm honest and I'm letting you know. Things are changing for me, but this isn't the end of my story. But it's definitely changing. And I hope you change along with me. Other episodes are going to be right back to, business, build a thriving business in life. We're going to continue on with that. But every once in a while, I'm going to weave in some of my struggles with Parkinson's because I've been asked to, and because I finally have sat with it long enough to come to terms with it. I cannot preach. Sharing your story might just be the one thing that changes somebody else and empowers them to make a change if I'm not willing to walk the walk and talk the talk. My Parkinson's is not like anybody else's. My life is not better or worse than anybody else's, but it's my life. And this is me navigating Parkinson's and having to rebuild and finding what it is I can serve and how I can give back and continue the impact that I felt I was called to make. Well, this is me saying thank you again. Stay fabo, stay grounded, stay present, and above all, my friends, keep being authentically yourself so that you can build what matters most and make the impact that each and every one of you are here to make. I'm so proud of all of you and the Motivated to Be Fabulous community. So don't forget to just continue to be yourself. Be the best version of yourself. Thanks, my friends. Until next time.